Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
When I was in journalism school in Toronto, I'd quit and switched to trades because screw journalists. I was writing a piece about a high-ranking municipal politician in Toronto. I dug up some weird rumors, stuff about secret societies, typical elite BS. This Persian girl in my program, Scheherazade, I just called her Cher, with whom I'd become friends, mentions that some guy in the university's plebit club is related to this politician. They're having a meetup and invited me to join. Gladly. I show up at this kid's downtown Toronto apartment, and it's what you'd expect. Fat dude with a pube beard lecturing some disinterested girls about Richard Dawkins. A few girls here for the booze. Cher introduces us, tells him I'm a journalism student. Apparently, he's the editor of the student paper. I ask him if he's in the program, as I've never seen him before. He says no, he's doing sociology. Weird, but whatever. Not what I'm here for. He tells me the next issue will be focusing on sexy stuff. Something about the way he says this rubs me the wrong way. I'm not super interested in writing for a paper that thinks people care about decolonizing adult toys or whatever, so I politely decline. We go to some stupid ping-pong place nearby. I pace myself so that I can maintain the upper hand in our conversations. Try and get him to divulge more than he would otherwise. Play a match or two with Cher as I watch him drink a few beers. He then disappears and comes back out messed up, clearly rolling. I ask him what he's doing, and he asks me if I want some Molly, flashing a baggie. It's then that I notice the tattoo of pick related between his thumb and index finger on the right hand. I politely decline and ask him how he can afford an apartment in downtown Toronto as a student. He told me his parents pay for it. Turns out his dad invented some kind of breathalyzer thing the court can put in your car if you get a DUI. And his mother has all kinds of connections in the non-profit sector. Pretty fed up at the end of the night not having gotten what I wanted, I headed back to my dorm room. To my surprise, I got a call the next day from Cher. John wants me to attend some victory party for a federal member of parliament who just won their riding. Write a puff piece in the student paper for him. Turns out he's one of this politician's administrative assistants. Sure, why not? Show up and it's stuffy. What I found strange is that his relative in municipal politics belongs to a different party than the one he works for. I don't get close to his employer, but I do notice a pendant around their neck that matches his tattoo. Curious. The night goes on, and I spy another guy there. Looks like some kind of animal rights activist. I dressed up for this thing, but he's dressed down, disheveled, smells bad. I caught him taking pictures on his phone a few times. I noticed this guy shadowing John all night. I confront him about it, and manage to suss out that he's some kind of hippie climate activist here undercover, and doing a poor job of it. I don't divulge why I am there and leave him be. I finally got a chance to ask John about his tattoo and his boss's pendant. He gets very cagey about it. Won't explain it to me, so I shift to provincial politics. He's clearly rolling again, so I try to get him to talk a bit more. Ask him about municipal politics. He does that thing people who are pretty deranged do, and whisper yells that his uncle is in the mayor's office. Whether this means his uncle is the mayor or close to the mayor, I don't know. He invites me and Shane, the undercover activist, back to his place. He wants to show us some maps, riding divisions or ward divisions or something. I figure this is a good chance to snoop around his place, so figure why not. We get there. He dims the lights and asks if we want to see something. He gives Shane the weirdest look, and I'm like, oh boy, here we go. But instead, he goes into his bedroom and comes back out with a leather-bound book. He told us something like, screw the 48 laws of power, this is all you need. It's got the sigil or symbol on the cover. Can't make out a title. He hands it to Shane, starts doing a weird dance, and offers Shane some Molly. He declines. While he's distracted and trying to drug, assault, or whatever this dude, I go into his bedroom to snoop around. There's some weird shrine in his closet. There's a depiction of a large colossus-looking figure holding what looks like a coin purse. The sigil is on its chest. There are pictures too. John's in them. The mayor is in them. Several prominent Canadian politicians are in them. I snap a photo just as John comes into the room. He gives me this look like a kid in puberty who just got caught by his mom. Panicked. Tell him I gotta go and double time it out of there. Now this is when shit starts to get strange. I start noticing people following me around. I come back to my dorm one day and it's obvious someone has been through it. I took a shower that same night, leaving my phone in the dorm. Come back and it's gone. Cher disappears. Her roommates, she rented a place off campus with 5 other girls, showed me a note she left. She's gone back to Iran. That doesn't make sense. She was born in Toronto. It's also not her handwriting. I noticed dead animals, ashes, bones, etc. being left in front of my dorm. I call the cops, but they don't seem too interested. There's some other things that I don't want to get into, but suffice to say, I left the program. Moved to the nation's capital and picked up a trade instead. I still catch glimpses of people following me around. I'll park my work truck at a site, then as I leave, notice that sigil spray painted nearby, carved into trees. I've even had pieces of paper with it written in red ink left on my dash. Oh, and John? He's the director of a nonprofit that received government funding until recently. This nonprofit gets consulted on a lot of high-level government decisions. He also became a journalism fellow at a prestigious public policy school. There's something rotten in Canada, and this time we don't have Mackenzie and Papineau to expose it.
This is an Ontario-based one, but I hope OP likes it. Back in 2004 or 5, our school planned a weekend field trip to the Toronto Islands, where they have a camping site for middle school students in order to teach them about ecology. We traveled by ferry over the foggy lake. It was exactly like the beginning of Shutter Island, in mid-November, with a couple of counselors. Now, the island we were at was famous because of the Gibraltar Point Lighthouse, where a gruesome murder took place, and it's said that the dismembered corpse of the victim still walks around the island wanting justice. The lighthouse is actually hundreds of meters away from the sea, if I'm not mistaken, as the island is mostly composed of drifting sand and soil, which accumulated from 1815 when the guy was murdered to modern day, increasing the beach's size. On the second day of our trip, after a long walk in the snowy trails and playing with birds in the woods, our counselor took us to the useless old lighthouse, which had long been replaced by a modern one closer to the shore. As soon as we were in the general vicinity of the place, everyone felt something weird in the air. Then our counselor began to tell us the story of an immigrant who came to Canada and began working at the lighthouse, transporting whale oil to and fro, trying to save up enough to buy a house. It didn't pay very well, however, so this guy began selling illegal moonshine on the side in order to make ends meet. He ended up befriending the local military folk, and they were his main clients for many years. In one particular year, however, he was close to buying his house and made one last deal with the military for New Year's Eve. However, they asked for way more booze than he could produce, so this smart immigrant added some water to half the bottles in order to fool his clients. They eventually arrived, paid for the bottles, and left, but no one expected the blizzard. Now, for those of you that don't know, alcohol doesn't naturally freeze in winter temperatures like water does. But due to the cheating moonshiner, many of the bottles were soon undrinkable blocks of ice. The soldiers that came to pick up the booze soon decided more than a few of their bottles on the road in order to warm up, and soon discovered what had been going on. Now, drunk and angry, they charged back to the lighthouse with one of them supposedly carrying an axe, and after a long night waiting for the moonshiner to come out, they eventually murdered him and buried his corpse in his own lighthouse garden. Years later, a new lighthouse keeper discovered this guy's remains in the ground, after supposedly seeing an armless spirit hovering over where he was buried. This soon became a widespread legend, and it said that the moonshiner kept his savings inside a loose brick within the lighthouse, so it became a popular location for treasure hunters. Naturally, we were all spooked after hearing this, and the counselor had us sit on the steps of the lighthouse to hear the ending of the story. But as soon as treasure was mentioned, most of the kids went wild trying to pull off every brick they could find, including me. Our counselor laughed until one of us ran to the top of the lighthouse trying to find a proper place where gold might be hidden. A few minutes later, he comes down screaming, saying that he heard something up there, and we all felt weird again. We soon left the place, but I'll never forget this day as the first time that I visited some place and thought, wow, this feels wrong for some reason. That was a great trip. Also, much of the story is actually corroborated by historical evidence, so apart from the spirit, this is all considered fact. Now, I'd like to visit the lighthouse again someday, maybe with some kind of film crew. The story also was featured on the Creepy Canada show, which I used to love as well.
I have a good true story. I was around 11 or 12 years old, staying at a dormitory at the Victoria campus in Toronto. My mom had some sort of conference she was attending. So, my brother and I tagged along. There were only 2 small beds, so my brother slept on the floor. My mom slept in the bed by the door, and my bed was near the window. It was around 2:30 a.m. and I woke up for no apparent reason. I remember checking the time before looking around the room. Past my feet at the end of the bed, standing in the doorway to the bathroom, there was a woman standing in the half-darkness. I could see her very clearly. She was young, looked Middle Eastern or Indian, had a green tank top and a red skirt. She stood staring at me for a long time, not moving or saying anything. I felt this overwhelming feeling of terror that prevented me from moving or screaming. Eventually, the woman moved backwards into the bathroom, where she stood again for a long time, but now she would occasionally sway slightly back and forth. The bathroom was a lot darker than the main room, so I couldn't see her as well, and eventually she seemed to merge into the shadows. After about 20 minutes of listening to my heart pound in my chest, I finally got up the nerve and leaped across my brother to my mom's bed and woke her up, saying, "Mommy, mommy, there's a lady in the bathroom." She got up and we checked together, turned on the lights and looked through the closet. I remember even looking into a tiny air vent to see if she could have gone in there. But she was gone, and I felt reassured and went back to sleep. My mom was apparently terrified and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. My brother slept through the whole thing. I think it was a waking dream. My mom thought it was a ghost. Either way, it was a freaky experience.
The Philip Experiment. In the 1970s, a group of Canadian parapsychologists wanted to attempt an experiment to create a ghost, proving their theory that the human mind can produce spirits through expectation, imagination, and visualization. The actual experiment took place in Toronto, Canada, in 1972, under the direction of the world-renowned expert on poltergeists, Dr. Alan Robert George Owen. The members of the experiment proposed an idea: by using extreme and prolonged concentration, they could create their ghost through a collective thought form, non-physical entities which exist in either the mental or astral plane. In order to create this ghost and make it as real as possible, it needed a life story, a background in which the ghost could relate to. They named the ghost they were attempting to bring into focus Philip Aylesford, and created a tragic story, explaining to the fullest and in great detail his life and the few actions that lead to his tragic death. The group first fabricated the fictitious identity, physical appearance, and personal history of their Philip Aylesford, who was born in England in 1624 and followed an early military career. At the age of 16 he was knighted. He had an illustrious role in the Civil War. He became a personal friend of Prince Charles, later Charles II, and worked for him as a secret agent. But Philip brought about his own undoing by having an affair with a gypsy girl. When his wife found out, she accused the girl of witchcraft, and the girl was burned at the stake. In despair, Philip committed self-termination in 1654 at the age of 30. Step 2 was contacting Philip. In September 1972, the group began their sittings, and after some initial problems, the group attempted to duplicate the atmosphere of a classic spiritualist seance. They dimmed the room's lights, sat around a table and surrounded themselves with pictures of the type of castle they imagined Philip would have lived in, as well as objects from that time period. Within a few weeks, Philip made contact. Although he did not manifest in spiritual form, appearing as an apparition or ghost, he did make contact through a brief rap on the group's table. Philip answered questions that were consistent with his fictitious history, but was unable to provide any information beyond that which the group had conceived. However, Philip did give other historically accurate information about real events and people. The Owen group theorized that this latter information came from their own collective unconsciousness. The sessions took off from there, producing a range of phenomena that could not be explained scientifically. His spirit was able to move the table, sliding it from side to side. On more than one occasion, the table chased someone across the room. All hands were clear of the table when this occurred. In conclusion, the experimenters were never able to prove the how and the why behind Philip's manifestation. Was Philip a direct result of the group's collective subconscious, or perhaps did they conjure an actual entity that simply latched onto the story? While some would conclude that they prove that ghosts don't exist, that such things are in our minds only, others say that our unconscious could be responsible for this kind of the phenomena some of the time. Another point of view is that even though Philip was completely fictional, the Owen group really did contact the spirit world. A playful, or perhaps demonic, some would argue, spirit took the opportunity of these seances to act as Philip and produce the extraordinary psychokinetic phenomena recorded. Whatever caused the manifestation, it seems that it adapted itself to the expectation of the audience, playing the role of the spirit they intended to contact. Since all was based on fiction, it could not be the spirit of Philip, so what else could it be?
I was driving between Sudbury and Toronto, Ontario one night, and I passed under what I could only describe as a UFO. It was probably 50 feet above the road and maybe 100 feet in diameter. All I saw were the lights. They were sort of moving around the outside top and bottom, red and white. I drove right under it, looking up, wondering what the hell is that. It's funny because I always wondered why footage or photos of UFOs are so god-awful. There's tons of good photography equipment out there. Now I am a photographer and I have camera equipment in the back of my car. I could get an amazing shot of this, but for some reason I just kept driving, looking at it in awe. I didn't get out and take a picture even though I have all this amazing equipment to do so. I just kept driving. Went back the next day as I knew I was going through a construction zone. Maybe it was a crane moving something over the road. But then if it were, they would have stopped traffic. And there was no one there working at the time. No crane in sight. No idea what I saw. Wish I had stopped. My ex-wife doesn't ever want to talk about it.
I'm not an Inuits guy, but my dad is. A number of years back, a Toronto woman disappeared in Rainbow Falls Provincial Park in Ontario. She went for an early morning hike with friends away from their campsite, turned back because she was still tired, and when they came back, they couldn't find her. They were traveling along a well-marked trail system and there were other campers in the area. The news played it up to be a big mystery. As soon as my dad heard it, he filled me in. The park is smallish and bordered by a logging road, 2 rivers and the Trans-Canada. You keep walking in any direction, follow any river you come to, and eventually you will be at a road that you can wait for help by. However, the park is very rough terrain, filled with deep wooded gorges. He's been through it, he knows that area. He said all she had to do was decide to take a shortcut through the bush for 5 minutes and she could have wandered right to the edge of a concealed cliff and fallen off. Without knowing exactly where she went over, or which direction she took the shortcut, or if she got back to camp first then wandered, it would be extremely difficult to find her body. You fall, break your neck, land in some bushes, and that's it. Over in 5 seconds, and unless you have a GPS beacon on you, they won't find you before the scavengers do. And that's all assuming, of course, that the people she was with didn't do some shady shit, which doubtlessly happens to young ladies in the wilderness.
Be me 6 years ago. Have a girlfriend and we sleep in the same bed together. Do meditations together, etc. My dad cheats on my mom. My girlfriend, my brother, and myself decide to take my mom out to this new restaurant that opened up. Charcoal grilled pizza. Ingredients imported from Italy. We're Canadian. Mom's all happy about it. Didn't go since. About 4 months later, parents get back together. Mom's gonna give Dad a second chance. Not my business. He moves back in. 4 months after that, it's brought up to go to this pizza place. My dad remembers being there. My mom and my brother remember the 5 of us all going to this pizza place. Dad apparently never cheated on my mom. Only me and my girlfriend remember that. My girlfriend and I remember everything as it happened. Everyone else remembers a completely different reality. In fact, my girlfriend and I are absolutely shocked at what we see going on around us. I read Reality Transurfing shortly after this. He has a section where he has an exercise in which you shift realities before your eyes. Quite fascinating, in fact. Have 2 more stories about shifting realities and timelines. Second story starts off about 14 years ago when I was in high school. I lived in Toronto, was born in Vancouver, had this childhood friend. Cute girl. Went back when I was 16 to visit some childhood friends as I kept in touch with them over social media all those years. I moved when I was 9, but reconnected when Facebook became popular just as I got to high school. Visiting them, Let's call the one girl AA and I kinda get a little close, but 16, so a little awkward about things. I'm only there for a week, but nothing happens. She's clearly interested in me though. Keep asking to cuddle and stuff when I'm over. I go back to Toronto. We kinda get close over video chats, won't get into details, but do over video chat what teenage hormones urge you to do. Goes on for a period, first time ever doing anything like that with a girl, so it had a fond memory for me. As time passes, we talk less frequently. One day she contacted me. Years later, still friends, just talk infrequently. Wants to vent. Guess she hooked up with some guy and had a miscarriage. Really upset about that. Didn't know she was pregnant. Don't know why, but whatever. 11 years go by. Later 5 we haven't spoken but a few times a year. Decide to make an effort to reconnect. Talk. She's not doing the greatest. Struggling with mental health, physical health. Apparently she's blind in one eye. Brush it off. Maybe she hid it all these years. Eventually we grew kind of close, a bit more intimate again. Meet up, do the thing. Talking also about the past. Explain how she was the first time I was close to anyone when young. She doesn't remember any of it. Go into detail. I'm a little versed in multi-reality theories by now. Ask about other traumatic events for her, like her miscarriage. She doesn't remember that either. Expression on her face suggested that too. Not just her hiding it. She's still a very open person. She genuinely memory hold this, or it just didn't happen.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.